What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we are going to continue our coverage over the Evolutionary War, and now we pick up with part 10. Now, part 10 is going to be another Spider-Man chapter, except this time it's going to come from the Spectacular Spider-Man series, annual number 8. Now, with that being said, this is a very important chapter because we do see the return of Gwen Stacy. Yes, you heard that right. The return of Gwen Stacy. Now remember, the whole point of the Evolutionary War is that one guy, better known as the High Evolutionary, is trying his best to advance the human race because he was able to create a counter-Earth, except that counter-Earth was actually taken from him by the Beyonders. Now, he did go out of his way to confront them, except when he did, he found out the Beyonders are God-like beings. And after that meeting, he went back to Earth and said, you know what? It's my time to try to help out the human race and to advance us into God-like beings. And so the whole point of the Evolutionary War is really him trying different schemes to kind of help advance the human race. But the last few chapters do go together because his latest scheme is him trying to use a genetic bomb to hopefully begin the process of advancing the human race. And so getting into the opening pages for today's video, we do pick up with Spider-Man just minding his business. He's really just sitting there petting a cat and kind of wondering about the idea of getting a pet cat, but also wondering if MJ, Mary Jane, likes cats, except out of nowhere a blast almost hits him, but he realized that blast was not meant for him. That blast was meant for somebody else. Something's happening nearby him. And so when he jumps over to see what's happening, well, he sees the gatherers trying to collect a woman. Now, when it comes to the High Evolutionary, he uses different groups as a way to help him achieve his goals. You have the Purifiers, you have the Eliminators, you also have the Gatherers and the Technicians as well. But currently, we're seeing the Gatherers trying to grab this woman, except apparently she has been able to escape not once but twice before this moment right here. They're having a hard time getting her, but now with Spider-Man being involved, they most likely are not going to be able to get her. Now, once you do have Peter Parker join the battle, he comes to find out the woman they are trying to grab is Gwen Stacy. And that's a huge problem because Gwen Stacy died back in Amazing Spider-Man number 122. And so he knows it has to be a clone. But the problem is he's too busy right now trying to protect her. Now, once he's able to kind of defeat the Gatherers to make them retreat, well, Gwen Stacy had disappeared. Now, something else I should mention. Before Gwen Stacy died, she believed that Spider-Man was an evil person, but she had no idea that Peter Parker was Spider-Man. And so even though you have Spider-Man go out of his way to save her life from the Gatherers, once she saw him, she freaked out and ran away. But he knows where she's going. She's going to his apartment. And so he has no choice but to change into his Peter Parker outfit to confront her. Now, we do learn from the High Evolutionary why he's so interested in the Gwen Stacy clone, because he says when it comes to her being around, it could possibly ruin the advancement of the human race, but at the same time, she is a genetic experiment that should not be around at all. It needs to be destroyed. But before it is destroyed, I want to study it to learn more about it and how in the world this clone was actually created. Now, when it comes to the High Evolutionary, he does mention that he has something else he must take care of, while you have the Gatherers go out of their way once again to hopefully find Gwen Stacy and bring her back over to their master. But then we shift our focus back onto Peter Parker. Now, when it comes to Peter Parker, we already know that he knows most likely that this is a clone. But for Peter Parker, it's still kind of hard to process the idea that your dead girlfriend clone is around again, and also you still have feelings for Gwen Stacy, even though she has been dead for a good while now. But on top of that, he's married. He's married to Mary Jane. And so when she comes home and she realizes that her husband's kind of sad about something, he tells her, hey, Gwen Stacy is alive, or the clone is alive and she's here again. But then we jump over to the High Evolutionary. Now, when it comes to the High Evolutionary, he does head over to a celestial spaceship. Now, here's the thing. On a celestial spaceship, you have a group of characters better known as the Young Gods. And the Young Gods were a very interesting concept that Marvel just quickly dropped in the 1980s. This group only appeared about 15 times, and that's really it. Now, here is their origin story. So, when it came to the Celestials, the third host, he came over to Earth and said, hey, I am going to judge the human race. If I feel like you guys are not worth to keep around, I'm going to wipe you out unless you are able to prove to me that you are a race we should keep around. And so what you had happen next was you had the different gods of Earth go around the Earth to find 12 men and women who can represent mankind's ideals. Now, this is going to be very important because once you have the different gods find the different 12 men and women, they begin to offer up these men and women over to the third host. And the reason why? Because they had a huge amount of power. And this power was kind of like God-like powers, which kind of shows that the human race deserves to stay alive, because if these 12 beings have the ability to become gods, then what could happen to the rest of the human race down the road? We deserve to live. And the third host agreed. But he took the 12 young men and women and handed them over to 2 people to begin their training into godhood. And that is where you have the High Evolutionary come in. Because once he heard about these young gods, he's kind of like, wait a second. There were a group of humans that became godlike beings. That means my goal is actually possible, which means the human race can become gods down the road. This is great. And so he goes out of his way to observe them, except when he does, he's kind of upset in what he sees, because all he sees is just a group of young men and women with godlike powers, but technically not using them in a way of like gods. Instead, using their powers like children. And that right there really bothers him. He wants to make sure once the human race becomes godlike beings, they do act like gods, not like children. And so he leaves. Except before he leaves, he was caught by the young gods. And you have one of them being able to figure out what he was actually up to by reading his mind. Now, once she tells the rest of her crew what's happening back on Earth when it comes to the High Evolutionary, you did have the young gods split up, because half of them say, you know what, that's Earth's problem. We are gods and we had to stay here and train until we're properly ready. But the other half says, no, we should go out of our way to help out our race because, hey, we don't want another Holocaust. Like literally, that is their example. Like, hey, the possibility of 6 million people dying right now because of that man is too huge for us to ignore. And so you have half of the young gods head back to Earth to possibly stop the High Evolutionary. But then we have to jump over to Peter Parker and Mary Jane and continue with their drama. Now, their drama is really more of that Mary Jane wants to know, is Peter Parker going to leave her? Is he going to leave her for Gwen Stacy? That's her main problem right there, because Gwen Stacy was Peter Parker's first love. He didn't lose her because of breakup. It's because she died. He still feels responsible for her death when he was fighting against the Green Goblin. And so for Peter, it's like, yeah, I still love her. But at the same time, it has to be a clone. It cannot be the real Gwen Stacy. I already know that. But at the same time, for Peter, it's kind of like, can this be another opportunity to get with Gwen Stacy and try to live a life with her? Is Peter kind of just going all different kinds of places, but at the same time still want to be with Mary Jane? Now, before our two characters are able to have a conversation with one another, the clone Gwen Stacy appears and she freaks out because at first she believes that she's coming to Peter Parker for comfort, but then finds out that Peter Parker is, well, Spider-Man. And she hates Spider-Man, and so she runs off. And Peter knows he has to chase after her to actually help her. But Mary Jane says, you better come back to me, but you better know which one of us you are going to choose. But here comes the problem, because once you have Peter Parker being able to catch up to the clone Gwen Stacy, well, she's attacked again by the Gatherers, because again, the High Evolutionary wants to study her and then get rid of her, literally destroy her. And so you do have Spider-Man jump in and try his best to protect her. But once you have the Gatherers being able to grab her, they begin the process of teleporting back over to the new base of the High Evolutionary. But Peter Parker was sitting near the giant robot, and so he also got teleported over to this new base for the High Evolutionary. Now, the next section, a lot of different things happen all at once. A whole lot of mess. Let me explain. So, you do have the Gatherers being able to take Gwen Stacy and put her inside a genetic scanner because, again, the High Evolutionary wants to study her. Now, when it comes to Spider-Man, he wants to save her, but he has no choice but to fight through the army of Gatherers inside this base. Now, when it comes to the High Evolutionary, he knows Spider-Man very well because this is Spider-Man's third chapter in this crossover event. He knows that Spider-Man was the reason why two of his schemes earlier were technically ruined. But this time he says, no, you are not going to stop this scheme right here, not knowing that the High Evolutionary is about to release some kind of genetic bomb. Either way, while you have Spider-Man fighting against the Gatherers and Gwen is being scanned, well, then you have the Young Gods appear. Now, when they appear, their main goal is to go after the High Evolutionary. But things continue to get even crazier because then the other half of Young Gods, who did not want any part of this at all, came here to get the other half of their team and take them back to their spaceship. And so now you have this all-out brawl between the Young Gods, the Gatherers, Spider-Man, and while all that is happening, the High Evolutionary is just scanning Gwen Stacy. Now, everything does get wrapped up when you do have the Young Gods leave, and the High Evolutionary is able to continue on with his goal. But the problem is Spider-Man still has no idea what in the world is going on. But either way, he is able to pull Gwen out of the scanner and hoping that he can leave. Now, before you have Peter Parker and Gwen being able to leave and go back to New York, they're stopped by the High Evolutionary, who then tells them, hey, what you have right there is not even a clone of Gwen Stacy. Matter of fact, it was a poor woman who was grabbed by Miles Warren and she was given a virus. And with that virus, it had genetically changed her to look like Gwen Stacy and to act like Gwen Stacy, but she never was Gwen Stacy. And so for Peter Parker, that's a problem because he was kind of hoping to spend some time with the clone Gwen Stacy because, again, he still feels responsible for the death of the original Gwen Stacy. But now he finds out the woman right here next to him is not even a clone. It's somebody else whose life got messed with thanks to Miles Warren. Now, the High Evolutionary does send Peter and fake Gwen back over to New York, except as soon as they arrive, you have Daydreamer appear. Now, when it comes to Daydreamer, she's one of the Young Gods, and she said, listen, While I was there in that base with you guys, I realized that she is not who she believes she is. And so I'm going to use my ability to give her her life back. And so just like that, the poor woman who was forced to think and act and look like Gwen Stacy is now able to think and act and look just like her old self again. And she leaves. And so Peter realized that this is most likely a sign to move on from Gwen and go be with your wife, Mary Jane. And he does. And this chapter of the war ends, and then we're set up for the final chapter in the next video. So with that being said, please leave me a like down below and subscribe. Also, if you have any suggestions on books I should read, well, please let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.